Hi, I'm Liam Milan, and in this video we're going to be exploring Ableton Live's Resonators. So Ableton Live has the device called Resonators, which we can drag and drop onto any track. So I'm going to drop it onto a drum track here. And the idea is it will take a source sound and then create resonances of the sound afterwards in time. And the nature of the resonance we can configure and choose to be how we want it to be. It can be melodic and harmonious, or it can be more dissonant and more like a special effect or a feeling of non-harmonic sound to go with it. So I've just loaded it into this drum track. So let's listen to it without. And then with. So immediately you can hear it has a tone to it. So our first control is our note control here. I'm actually writing this song in the key of A at the moment. It's an A minor tuning as well. So I'm going to drop this down to A. And if I just play you a quick bit of the chords that come in later, you'll see that it makes sense. So let's focus back on the drums. So a couple of the controls we have here is how we can shape the nature of the resonances. So the first thing is a filtering section. And if I just stick it to be a 100% wet signal, we can just hear the difference the filter makes. So at the moment it's a bandpass filter, which is really good when you're trying to run this alongside the original sound, so with a dry-wet balance. And you get the tuning as you want it, you get the nature of the harmonic content as you want it. Then you want to use like an EQ to just move the actual frequency content of the sound and let some of it through and not the others, and make it sit within the track. We have a low pass. Good if you want to create some more kind of low energy behind your track. High pass, if you want to just kind of make sure it's only in the sort of higher frequencies. And then a notch filter, which is especially good if you find that the sound that's coming from Resonator is a little bit conflicting with the original sound. Maybe it's making it sound a bit congested. You can find with a notch filter where it doesn't want to compete with the original sound and tune it in. So let's bring the drums back in. Around about the kind of the 300-400 hertz area, it's not going to compete with some of the lower thuddy sounds of the drum kit there. So that's how we can shape the actual overall frequency content of the resonance that comes out. The next thing, we have a decay control. So again, if we go to fully wet and we increase that, you'll hear what it does. At the moment it's in a constant mode, so all the resonances are the same duration. We can have a different contour to the sound where lower resonances last longer and higher resonances don't actually last as long as well, just by disabling the constant mode. And then finally we have a color control, which is basically just about the tonal balance of the sound. Now, before we move on to these different resonators themselves, we have a resonance mode too. Mode A is quite harmonic and mode B is better for more dissonant or more special effect type sounds. So as I mentioned before, you can liken the A mode to being more like a natural world resonance where things are harmonically sympathetic and working in a positive way of the sound. And the B mode is more for getting more metallic or more special effect type resonances. So these are our actual resonators themselves. We've got the first one which we tuned. So that one's running in A1 right now. Now the next one we can tune apart from that A1 key. And as a note, we can disable any of these resonators we don't want to use, and it does actually change how much consumption it takes from the computer's processing. So depending on how many of these you want to have in your project, it's worth disabling any that you don't need to use. So I'm going to go for a normal perfect fifth. I'm going to put 7 semitones, into the pitch control here and increase a fifth above that A1. And these gains can allow me to balance that signal too. So let's play that alongside our original drum track, and let's just remove the filter so it's as full range in terms of frequency content as it can be. Okay, now if you want to bring in a minor third, we can increase that resonator and do 3 semitones up. And just balance that between the two. That box I was just putting the detail into there, that's actually the detune control. So just like a synthesizer where you have fine sense to be able to tune an oscillator up, just like slightly turning the tuning peg on an instrument, it can slightly increase and slightly decrease the resonances. When you do that, things become slightly more conflicting and less harmonious. So a slight detune will make these different resonances start interacting with each other and create more movement in the sound. So it's quite a good way of getting things to seem a little bit deeper and a bit more engaging. Just finding that sweet spot of it being a little bit detuned to get some movement, but going too far you get the more metallic resonances, and in this case I want it to be harmonious, so that's not what I want. But if you go quite far away from the sort of concert pitch tuning, you can create some interesting interactions between these resonators. Okay, so that's us working on drums. The final thing to take on note when you're doing sort of rhythmic work like this is you might want to use that filter, let's say that high pass filter, to just only allow it to shimmer in the top end. So it becomes like the root of the whole song, the actual key of the song is just resonating in the drum track. So I'm going to increase the high pass filter here. Maybe decrease the decay so it's a bit more rhythmic. And finally, let's actually drag this to the whole drum track rather than this layer. This is new, so let me just play the original. And it's a method of being able to make my drums actually have a bit more tuning to them, so the actual whole rhythmic track can just hold down that main key of the tune as it plays through. So let's try that again, but this time let's do it on the piano chords and see what effect it has on an actual melodic sound source. So I've got a resonator already loaded in here. Let's go for that note again and let's find the most compatible octave of the A to work with to begin with. So my piano sounds like this. Let's try the dry wet while we do the actual note tuning. So let's try a higher octave as well. Let's try a different mode as well and see if that sounds any more suitable with this sort of sound. Okay, in this context, the B mode actually sounds a little bit more sort of unique to the source sound. When we're working in A mode, it's that more harmonious mode. And it's quite useful as a way of creating a softer version of the source sound, as well as like a reverb spatial sound too. On that note, we have the width control too. So you may have noticed that the sound we're having is quite spatial right now with different frequencies in the left and the right channels. If we bring the width in, we'll go towards a more unified left and right channel where we get something that sounds more central in the mix. So let's try an octave above this time. Let's go at 12 semitones for the next resonator. And then 24 semitones above that for another resonator. Which is being triggered quite nicely by the rhythmic part of the higher notes there. So let's see if we can sort of work on that a little bit more and just go for a slightly higher octave here too. or sorry, the same octave, but let's detune it this time. Let's go for slightly sharp and slightly flat on those 2 octaves. So it sounds quite cinematic when we go for a very wet signal. We are in the bandpass right now, and it is set to 500 Hertz, which is what we call quite a boxy area of the mix. So it's resonating in not necessarily the most suitable place in context of all the other sounds. So let's sweep that, or try it with the filter off and see if it works better with our piano sound. Okay, so let's just do one more application before we finish on this. We've got all the controls covered in terms of what they do on the resonators themselves. So let's just loop around this kick drum, which can be seen as a trigger sound. So I'm just going to Command and L and loop around that highlighted portion of the track and solo that out. Let's get a resonator on there. And an interesting response can happen when we dramatically down tune the resonator. So we'll get the actual source sort of resonance, which is our note resonator here, which is the backbone of every subsequent resonator that comes in. And let's tune this right down. And let's try those 2 different modes, and also let's turn the filter off, and then we'll choose if we want to filter it afterwards. Try an octave above again. So we're going from what's a dry kick sound here to something that's obviously elongated because the resonances are making it a much longer sound. But when we go to a lower tuning, it's creating much more of a rhythmic kind of resonance that's going on with the sound. And I've just played around with doing dissonant tuning. So from the A0 that the original resonator is doing, I've tuned the next one to just the semitone above it. So they're neighboring notes, which is quite a dissonant sound. And then after that, I've gone for the next neighboring note. So 3 notes side by side is a very dissonant sound. So it's a good way to sound design and create some interesting resonances from any kind of source sound that can then trigger the reaction of the resonators afterwards. So what we've covered here is how we can use resonator as a rhythmic, tonal tool and be able to make our percussive or our drum part start singing in the key of our track. We've also looked at how we can use it to enhance or add another tone and sort of sense of depth to actual harmonic content as well. And then finally, we put it in the context of trying to use it as a sound design tool to take the shortest of starting points in terms of the source sound and allow the resonators themselves to elongate and create more timbre change over time.